Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dave Hideman. I'm the application specialist for the steel segment here at Trimble. And today we're here with Giza software. Looking forward to learning more about how we can take their connection design software and integrate it with Tekla Structures. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that you can use the questions pane in the GoToWebinar window. If any questions come up during the presentations, feel free to type them in there. We are going to answer a few questions at the end, and then any that we don't have time to get to, we're going to make sure that we follow up with you guys after the fact. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Ben Vossmeyer. He's a software specialist with Giza to show us how their software can work with Tekla.
Thanks, Dave. So before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment to thank the entire Tekla team for letting us come on and do this spotlight. I'm really excited to see what you all think about Giza and how it interacts with Tekla Structures. I've got a lot of features to talk about, so why don't we hop right in and get started. So as you can see here, I've got both Giza and Tekla Structures open with a variety of connections on our model. And I want to grab these connections and import them into Giza so we can start designing them. And it's very easy to get these connections into Giza. All I have to do is highlight a chunk of the model or a single connection or the entire model, and then Giza will take these highlighted connections and import them. And all of those connections that I had highlighted will show up in this big list here. Now, if I had gotten the entire model, it would show them all in this list, and sometimes it may be hard to figure out which item in the list corresponds to which part of the model and which connection. So I can actually click on these line items, and it will highlight the same connection in the Tekla model, so you know exactly what you're looking at. And some of these connections that I highlighted may not have made it onto this list. So if there are any connections that didn't get processed, Giza will actually tell you which ones didn't get processed and why. So it may have been an unsupported connection, or it may not have been set up correctly in your Tekla model. Giza will tell you exactly what the problem was, so it all just depends. So I'm going to grab these 6 connections here, it's these 6 shear connections, and I'm going to process them into Giza so it can prepare for designing. Giza will run all of the initial calculations for these connections, as well as grab the job information from the Tekla model. And once Giza is finished processing all of these connections, they will appear in the section on the right here. And just at a quick glance, I can see all of the important information about the connection, whether that be the beam sizes, the loads, or the governing checks, or whether or not it's passing or failing. And as more connections are processed from the same Tekla model, this list will grow and grow as you add more connections. And this list can be sorted in many ways. You can sort by the phase, you could sort by the connection type, or even just a keyword that you type in. Now, you may have noticed that I grabbed 6 connections and processed them, but only one line item appeared over on the list on the right. This is because connections that share the same connection code and the same loads can actually be designed at the same time. But if I want to look at these connections individually, I can click these IDs here, and Giza will highlight those connections in the Tekla model, and I can design those separately if I wanted to. But we're going to design them all at the same time, so we're going to bring up our check window, and this will show us all of the limit states that Giza has calculated for these connections. If we expand these categories, we can see each limit state in each category, the red limit states being the ones that are failing, and the black ones being the ones that are passing. On this connection, we can see that the only limit state that's failing is the shear capacity at the reduced section. Some more helpful information can be found at the bottom of the check window, the first being the governing check. This is the limit state that's failing the most on this connection. And we can also check the UCV, or unity check value, of the governing check. Now this is sort of the numerical value that determines how much the limit state is failing. Anything 1 or above will be failing, and anything below 1 will be passing. and the farther you get above one, the more the limit state will be failing. And now that we know which limit states are failing, in this case only one of them, we can start designing the connection. And Giza will actually recommend certain design changes based on the limit states that are failing. And you can see here that Giza is recommending us to add a doubler plate. But let's say we didn't want to go with the recommendation. We can go to all of the options and change any aspect of the connection that we want to change. But we are going to go with Giza's recommendation and add a doubler plate. And once we've done so, we can then recalculate all of these limit states based on this design change that we just made, so we can see exactly how those design changes affected our connection. And we can see now that our connection has a big green passed with a check mark, and if we expand all of these limit states, we can see that they're all passing. So we have successfully designed our connection, and now we want to get this connection back into the Tekla model. And with one simple button click, we can apply this design back into our Tekla model, and these connections are being updated in real time, and you can see the doubler plates being added on all 6 of those connections. And with these doubler plates, Giza will make all of the necessary changes that need to be made to fit these doubler plates onto the connections. So you can see the angles being moved down to fit the doubler plate on there. And it does have to go through each of these 6 connections individually. If we were to have only designed one of these 6 connections, the design changes would happen much quicker, and the more connections that you add on to this, the longer the process will take. And once these design changes have been made, Giza will then recalculate these limit states to make sure that no Tekla dependencies have changed. And now that our design has been applied to the model, we can then apply our connection capacity to the model. This basically puts all of the numbers in the back end of the connection in Tekla, as well as it will change the connection to a nice pretty green color to show anybody that views the Tekla model that this connection has passed. And since now our connection capacity has been applied, we are done with this check window. And we have successfully gotten a connection from Tekla, designed the connection, and then put that design back into the Tekla model. And now I want to get more into the color that was applied to the connection after we had designed it. Another integration that Giza has with Tekla is the ability to apply color coding to all of your connections in your Tekla model based on the status of the connection, so whether it has passed or failed or otherwise. So I had just mentioned that green means the connection has passed, and if we find some of the other connection colors, this red means that the connection is failing in at least one limit state, and this yellow means that the connection is not yet supported in Giza. And if we scroll around and find an orange connection, this means that the connection needs verification in some way. This could mean that it doesn't meet erection clearances, or you may have a stiffener plate that isn't required, or any number of reasons. And if there's a connection that doesn't have a color, it means that it hasn't been run through Giza yet. Now, this color coding is very easy to set up. It only takes a few minutes, and a tutorial can be found on our website on how to do it. Now, the next thing that I want to go over is how Giza can integrate with Tekla shop drawings. So I'm going to open up a shop drawing that has a connection that was designed using Giza. So if we zoom in on the connection that was designed, we can see this box that has been added to the shop drawing. And this box can contain all sorts of useful information, anything from the connection code to the %UDL to the connection capacity, and several other options that you can set yourself. On this drawing, there's actually a cloud around the box. This is put there when the connection needs verification for some reason, so if the connection is orange like we talked about earlier. And once again, this only takes a few minutes to set up, and a tutorial can be found on our website. And now I want to show you how we can design a connection that has multiple components within it. So if I scroll around this model, I can find ourselves a two-way moment connection. Now, importing this connection is going to be identical to the first way that we did it. All we have to do is highlight all of the components that are in the connection, and then we can import that into Giza. And now that it's in this list here, there's two of them here, but the top one is going to be the correct one because it does have both of the connections that we need in it. And now we can process this. And if you notice, our shear connections that we had designed previously are still in this list to the right. That's because Giza saves your session every time you use it and use it on the same model. So if we were to keep grabbing connections from this model, this list would just keep stacking up. And now that our moment connection has been imported, we can see that there are two line items underneath the moment connection. This is because it has one line for each of the beams that are connected to the column. And this is also because Giza recognizes these two beams as one whole connection. So we'll calculate all of these limit states looking at these two beams as one single connection. And now I want to show you something called the single view for this connection. For each connection in that big list that we had retrieved from the Tekla model, you can choose to see more detailed information about the connection. This new window will show you everything you would want to know about your connection. Down in the bottom left side, we can see the job information. This is all of the information that was pulled from the project properties section of the Tekla model. And above that, we can see all of the specifics on how the connection is currently designed. Whether that be your beam or column sizes, whether that be your bolts or your parts or your welds, any information that can be pulled from the Tekla model it will be listed here. And all of these fields are actually grayed out because we cannot edit them. Since this connection was retrieved from a Tekla model, if we want to change the base design of the connection, we would need to go back to the model and change it, and then re-import it into Giza. And over on the right section, we have a basic sketch of the connection. And from this single view, we can still get to our check form, so we can see which of these limit states are passing and which of them are failing. And it looks like a lot of the limit states on this connection are failing. We can go ahead and expand these categories to see which limit states exactly are failing out of all of them. And since this is a two-way moment connection, there are two beams that we need to design as well. You can see that there are two tabs up at the top that you can switch through, and each tab will show the individual limit states for each beam. So I'm going to go ahead and design the first beam. I already know all of the values that need to be inputted to make this connection pass, so I'm just going to enter in all of those. And now that that's done, we can recalculate the limit states to see if these changes did anything. If I look at the tab for beam 1, it looks like everything has passed, but beam 2 still has limit states that are failing. And I can make design changes as many times as needed to make this connection pass. So we're going to go ahead and design again, and this time we're going to design beam 2. Once again, I know all of the values that need to be entered to make this connection pass, so I'm going to do that now. And with all of these design changes made, we can calculate again and see if the connection passes, which it does. And since I now have a passing connection, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the first connections and apply that design back into the Tekla model. Giza will now recheck the connection to make sure the node dependencies have changed. And with the design applied, we can now apply the capacity. And now we have a nice green moment connection. Now let's say I wanted to send this connection that I've designed in Giza over to like the engineer of record. We've actually designed our own file type called the .gza file. These files are used for transferring Giza connection information from one computer to another. Any connection in Giza can be saved as a GZA file, so I'll go ahead and save that connection that we just designed, the two-way moment connection, as a .gza. Saving this GZA file will allow anybody running Giza to open this connection and even import that design back into the original model from a separate computer. So our moment connection has been saved, and now I want to open a different connection that was designed on a separate computer. I'm going to open up this vertical bracing connection. And this connection was designed on a separate computer and using a separate Tekla model. So we're just going to open it up and see what's inside. And whenever you open a GZA file, it's going to open up in the single view that we saw earlier. We can thumb through all of the information and see just exactly how the connection is set up. And because this connection was retrieved from a Tekla model, all of these fields are still grayed out, and we would need to edit the original model to change the base design. But something we can do with this connection is create a calculation report. With Giza, you can create full calculation reports that you can then send to your engineer of record to be stamped. And there are several different options that you can use when creating your reports. You can choose between a simplified or a detailed report, either whether showing all of the information or only the relevant information. And all of these calculation reports are saved as PDF files. So I'm going to start generating this report, and we will see what it's like when it's done. And since these reports do take a little bit of time to generate, I want to talk about our 15-day free trial. So after the webinar, if you go to our website, you can download a 15-day free trial of Giza, and that includes all of the features of the full version. So you can go ahead and try it out for yourself and see how it works. And our website and all of our contact information will be displayed at the end of the webinar. So it looks like our report has finished generating, so let's go ahead and find it and open it right up. So the first thing you'll notice about this report is the header at the top, and this is displayed throughout all of the pages, and this header can actually be changed to whatever image you want. So you can upload your company logo and match really whatever your needs are. And on the first page, you'll see the connection sketch. This is the same sketch we saw in the single view right before we made the report. And this sketch is really used as a reference for all of the calculations inside the report. So it's not to scale or exact, it's really just so that you can reference all of those values. And starting on the second page, we can see a basic summary of all of the values for the connection. And past that is really the meat of the report. It shows all of the calculations that are done, all of the references, and even specific page numbers referenced in the AISC manuals. And if we go all the way to the bottom, we can see the connection schedule for this report. And this is just another summary of all of the values for this connection. But that's about it for the reports generated by Giza. But now I have one last topic that I want to go over with all of you, and that would be custom components. Whenever you install Giza, you will also get a set of custom components made by us here at Giza to go into your Tekla model. Each of these adds something new to the component library that we think would be very beneficial. So I'll go ahead and open up the Tekla list of components and show you exactly where you can find them. All I have to do is search Giza in the component list and they'll all show up. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Giza 1 and show you what it's all about. Giza 1 is another component option for your simple shear connection library. This component allows you to add doubler plates and horizontal stiffeners to your shear connections. Some of you may have noticed that the first connections that we did, all 6 of those shear connections, were actually Giza 1 components. And the same goes for the moment connection that we designed. That is also a Giza component. And if you were to download that trial I was talking about earlier, you can try out these components for yourself. But that about does it for the technical side of the webinar. And before I kick it back over to David to ask me some questions, I do want to say thank you again to all of you coming, and thank you to the Tekla team once again for letting us come on and do this spotlight. So now I'm going to have David ask me some questions that you've all submitted. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Ben. So at this time, we're going to take just a couple minutes and go through a few quick questions. Like I said earlier, after the presentation is over, what we'll do is make sure we follow up with anybody who asked questions through the chat window. But just to go through a couple here, so Tekla Structures comes in multiple configurations or multiple license types. So what types of licenses, what types of Tekla licenses work with Giza software?
So currently we support the viewer, limited, and full licenses of Tekla Structures.
All right. So the second question, how is Giza licensed? How do they work?
We have 3 license types that users can buy. The first one being standalone dedicated licenses. These are licenses that you put on a single machine and that license stays on that machine. The second being network licenses. These being licenses you install on a server and any computer attached to that server with Giza installed can access that license. And the third license type is an enterprise license. So this would be for companies that have offices in multiple locations or countries.
Okay. For the next question, does Giza only work with certain Tekla components?
Yes. So for each connection that we support, there is a certain Tekla component that corresponds to that connection, as well as some of the Giza plugins that are installed when Giza is installed. And a list of all of the components that go with each connection can be found on our website.
Okay. And then the final question we'll do, at least live, is so what kind of connections can Giza design? We have shear connections. What other types can we handle with Giza?
So in the webinar, I showed off that we can do a shear, moment, and vertical brace connections. And so those are the 3 main connection types that we support. But we also support many subtypes of those connections. And within all of those, they add up to about 129 different connections.
Okay, well, we're going to have to stop there. Thank you, Ben. We really appreciate you joining us today, taking the time to show people how they can use Giza for connection design in Tekla Structures. Again, for any questions that we couldn't get to, we will definitely follow up with you guys after the webinar. If you are looking for additional information about Giza, you can visit gizasteel.com. Thank you all for watching.